Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Robert Robinson. I work with the Office of Recapitalization on the RAD program, and welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us. We've got some exciting announcements and exciting news to share with everybody this afternoon, and I'm going to walk through a presentation of it. But first and foremost, I want to just kind of take a look at a couple of housekeeping items. As I go through the presentation, there will be an opportunity for you all to ask a question. You can either raise your hands, or my obvious preference is for you to raise your hand and I can call on you and you can ask the question on your mics. But if you can't do that or don't want to do that, that's fine. There is a little question section on your cards where you can type in a question, and I'll do my best to get to those as we move through. So this presentation is going to be recorded. Will be posted on the RAD resource desk, so you and your colleagues can take a look at it later on another time. There isn't much of a quote unquote presentation, so it's not like I'm going to be sharing a slide deck. I'm actually going to be doing a demo of the new questions and answers. So there won't be anything posted from that perspective, but we will be posting the presentation itself. So without further ado, I will take us to the resource desk and we will get started with the presentation. So hopefully you all are all familiar with the RAD resource desk and the RAD homepage. I'm going to go back to the homepage so you can see what that looks like when I log in as a PHA or any user of the resource desk. I have my homepage and my home cards. In this particular case, I'm going to be going to a property with the chap issued, because that's where I'm going to start entering information. And you can see that I have started to enter information here. The concept call, which needs to be scheduled before the financing plan can be submitted, gives you a whole series of things that you still need to do. And you can see in this case, there are a whole bunch of items that have shown up for this particular transaction that needs to be completed, approvals that need to be obtained, that sort of thing. A few of these, like the FHEO relocation checklist, the accessibility review, those items we moved over the resource desk a while ago, and you all have been using them for a long time, and I think it's been going very well. But working with FHEO, we've now come up with the last of the three kind of upfront civil rights review cards, if you will, the site neighborhoods, the change in occupancy type, the unit reduction or configuration change. So those reviews are now going to be moved over to the resource desk, and you'll no longer be doing checklists for those. So how's that going to work? Well, let's go back to one that I haven't done anything on yet, and let's start anew. So when I start my submissions to the resource desk as a PHA, there are a number of different places that I go, and one of the things, however, that we always try and encourage PHAs to do is start with a concept call checklist, because this is what then drives all of the various submission requirements that you're going to have that are special, unique to your transaction. All transactions have to do a conversion overview. All transactions have to make some sort of EC&A tool upload, environmental reviews, board approvals, resident meetings, those sorts of things. But depending on different circumstances, you might have to submit for an upfront civil rights review from FHEO. Most of those have to be completed, submitted, and approved prior to your obtaining a concept call. But if you don't answer the questions on the concept call checklist correctly, you may not know you have to do this, or you may do it incorrectly. And that's what we're trying to stop. Those are the sorts of errors that RECAP and FHEO have been working over the last, I would say probably hard over the last 6 months, but certainly for the last couple of years, to try and come up with forms that work for you all in completing them, and for the FHEO team that does their reviews. So I'm not going to go through all of the permutations and all the questions and possible answers and all of that sort of thing with you all today. But what I am going to do are go through the cards and the questions that are being asked that drive those cards. One of the most important things to know from an FHEO perspective is whether a transaction is going to be new construction or not. So that's why this is the first question. If I answer this question in the affirmative, then I'm going to be asked to do a couple of different reviews. So I'm just going to go through these first few questions, which drive these upfront civil rights reviews. And then we're going to take a look at the new cards that are being created. So in this case, I'm going to say it's new construction. So since it's new construction, it's not going to be substantial rehab. That would be a different set of cards. But luckily for the new construction, it incorporates all the cards that would be for the substantial rehab as well. So that's catching all of the ones that we would have to do. Another question that's popular, are we going to reduce the number of units of the property? And is that reduction going to be beyond the de minimis number? So we're going to answer yes to those. Are we going to reconfigure the units? Well, let's just do the whole thing here. Let's reconfigure the units, yes. Are we going to change the preference? So is it currently an elderly property and we're going to make it family? Or is it a family property and we're going to make it elderly? Or is it currently an elderly and we're going to take away the preference or designation? That's also a change. Just a note that regardless of what we do, this flag always is going to show up to remind people that we have no designations post RAD conversion. So let me stress that again. After RAD conversion, public housing allows for designations, Section 8 does not. So at any point in time, if you're going to be moving from an elderly property today as a designation and you want to keep the elderly status, you can, but only through a preference, okay? So that's something that everyone needs to be aware of in kind of the terminology standpoint. So those are the kind of the biggies, and those are the ones that I want to make sure that we've answered correctly. And I'm just going to go ahead and update the checklist here so that we get the new cards, if you will, that are coming up. So the concept call checklist is a series of cards. The relocation review also has a series of questions and answers. So you want to make sure you're answering these. So in this case, let's say, nope, we haven't relocated any tenants. Yes, we're going to relocate them. Yes, we're going to relocate them for more than 12 months. And now we're going to do no on 12 months. Let's just do yes on everything. All right. So you see all of the questions and answers. And for those of you who have been through this process before, you see that the resource desk opens and closes things depending on how you answer questions. And that's the way you're going to see all of these new cards that are done as well. But let's just save this so that we have all of the possible items that we have opened up for us. So as you navigate through the resource desk, one of my favorite features is our little go-to menu here at the top. So this allows me to jump to all of the various cards that I'm going to be working on without having to scroll down. You can certainly scroll if you like to scroll. Tends to give me a headache, so I don't like to scroll down the pages as much. I much prefer to jump to the section that I want to go to, even if I'm going through them in sequence. So if I'm going to do the concept call checklist first, I'll jump to that, then the relocation review, and so on. This is also helpful for when you come back and you've been doing some submissions and you want to go make a change or correct something. It's an easy way for you to jump between the different cards. So as I've already mentioned, the relocation review has already been done for you all in the past. You've been working on that card for a while. Similarly, the accessibility review card has been on the resource desk and you have been using that. However, we've added some additional information. Working with other offices in HUD, particularly the FHEO offices, but also the asset management folks, as well as some of the PIH folks, it's become very clear that HUD is focused a lot on UFAS, Section 504, accessibility, all those sorts of designations and requirements. And that's a big piece of RAD conversions. And it's a big piece of managing the HUD inventory. And so we've got a lot more questions and more information that we want to ask for you all to complete. And so we've created multiple tables now where we've created information in your entire inventory, as well as what your waiting list looks like, okay? So a lot more detail is going to be provided by you coming through RAD conversions. So while this was done in different checklists and different grids through Excel spreadsheets and templates that were created, now we're doing it all on the resource desk, which hopefully, knock on wood, makes it easier for you all to enter. And hopefully, again, it makes it easier for the FHEO staff to review approve, come back to you with questions, get clarifications, those sorts of things. So hopefully it'll make that process better for everybody, okay? So again, expanding this accessibility card a little bit more, but this isn't necessarily new. The new cards are the last three. So these last three upfront civil rights review cards have been created, and you will no longer be completing a standalone checklist. The ability to upload those checklists in the resource desk will go away. You'll be able to upload additional information, and I'll show you that when I start looking at these, but you'll no longer be uploading information for these items into the financing plan grid, much like the relocation reviews and the accessibility reviews before. For the last, I believe, 18 months, we've been doing those. So that's going to change. So let's just kind of go through these in order as they appear. So the Site Neighborhood Standards Review, you're going to get this new card. The most important thing for FHEO to know and understand is that you as a PHA have certified to the Site Neighborhood Standards, okay? So even if you have done that in your annual plan, you are still going to need to check this box confirming that the language that you're affirming, it's posted, you're going to pop that here in the resource desk, you're going to upload that, but you are affirming that this specific language, you're certifying to this, okay? So that's an important change that's being made. This certification is critical. So if you haven't worded this exactly like this in your annual plan, that's okay, because you are standalone certifying it here, okay? For those of you who have done these in the past, you'll recognize a lot of these categories. For those of you who haven't done it before, and this is your first time seeing this, the idea behind these cards is to walk you through all of the various requirements and get you to answer the questions that need to be answered so that FHEO can do their review. We've tried to put in links to various documents that you might need. For example, the Minority Concentration Analysis tool, that link is here. You'll click on this, a new window will come up. You'll be able to upload it, complete it, and then put it onto the resource desk here, okay? You're then gonna go through and answer all the various questions. And depending on what questions you ask, or the way you answer them, you may or may not have additional questions that come up, okay? So if I answer no to this, I don't have to answer that next question. If I answer yes, I do. What if I change my answer? If I change my answer, some of the things that you've done in the past won't matter anymore, okay? So we recommend that you go through this fairly comprehensively, but we do recognize that you're gonna be making some changes as you go through. We just hope that all of this prompts you to get the correct answers the first time rather than having to do work over again or forgetting something and having to come back and do it later. But again, that's gonna happen and we recognize that. So you're not gonna lose any files that you upload. If you're asked to upload a file and then you suddenly come back and change the answer and the file wasn't required anymore, that file is not gonna be reviewed by the FHEO reviewer. They're not gonna see that file. But if you come back and later change it back and say, you know what, I really did need to submit that file, the file will be there for you moving forward, okay? Again, the purpose of today is not to walk through this with all of the various answers, to see all of the various permutations and to get you all information on what's going here and what's going there. The purpose of today is to simply show you this is what's going to start happening, and then hopefully the questions are asked in a way that allow you to provide the information that FHEO needs for their review and you need to do to prepare your financing plan, okay? A lot of these questions, as you'll notice, when I come up with this is a very small card at the moment, and as soon as I answer this question, I have a whole bunch of other questions that have to get answered depending on the answer that I make, okay? So there's more stuff, more certifications, more updated information, okay? So we always have the same save for later selection. You can't submit until you answer all of the questions. One of the things that we see on the resource desk a lot from users is someone will type in a note to us saying, I don't understand, I can't hit the submit button, it's grayed out. Well, the reason it's grayed out is you haven't done something that was required of you. You haven't answered all the questions. You haven't checked the box to affirm that you're certifying to this. You haven't put the information in. So make sure that you're filling out all of the information, that you're answering all of the questions. So once you do that, you'll be able to hit that submit button. And when you hit the submit button, the resource desk will generate an email that goes to the FHEO staff, letting them know that they have something that they need to review for your transaction. You'll also see the submission date here, okay? That will then kick off the 60-day window that FHEO has to review and approve, hopefully, knock on wood, review and approve your submissions. I will tell you that working with FHEO on a regular basis, they are working very hard to turn these around more quickly. And recently, I would say that they've been doing most of these reviews within 30 days. So those of you who are concerned about the timing and the fact that they've given themselves 60 days, most of the time they're not taking 60 days. When they take 60 days, they will have gotten back in touch with you probably at the day, 20 days in to say, I need some more information. So the ones that are taking longer are ones where they need additional information and they want you all to provide it. And there's some back and forth with you all as PHAs. Okay. Change in occupancy preferences. This is, again, a little bit nuanced, but at the same time, trying to get to the heart of the matter. And the heart of the matter for an FHA review is to make sure that, whatever the property is designed, whoever the property is designed to serve, they are continuing to be served post-RAD conversion. So any changes that you're making in a designation or changes in numbers of units, the percentages of units, either adding or taking away from, FHEO wants to see what's going on. And they want to know what's going on kind of by type. So family, elderly, and disabled. So at-risk populations, we want to make sure we know what's going on with those. You'll notice consistently throughout that FHEO is looking for information about your waiting lists. Okay, so hopefully this will be easier for you all to populate and easier for them to review rather than getting documents passed back and forth that people forget about which version this was and at what point in time, when did I submit, that sort of thing. So this gives people an opportunity to submit information, hopefully one time. A lot of this information you'll find kind of rolls through. We're calculating the percentages for you. So places that we have grids that are being populated, we're trying to do it as minimal number of times for you as possible. One of the things that we know we're going to want to improve on and enhancements that we're going to make after we roll this out are places where these same grids are being asked in different reviews. So when you have a change in occupancy preference and a unit reduction in the same transaction, these grids are asked similarly. And so we want to make sure that you're not populating things too many times, or that they're one's populated on one day and 6 months later you're populating a different one and they don't talk to each other and that sort of thing. So that's one of the things that we're working very hard to make sure we will do. Okay, I see that I have a question. These cards show only show. Yes, right. So to confirm, these cards are only showing up if you've answered the questions that require the completion of them. So back to the concept call checklist, if I had answered no to these, then I wouldn't be seeing these checklists. You're only going to complete these checklists if you're required to do so through the answer to the questions that you've given. So very good clarification. Thank you for that. Okay. And you'll see that we've put in a fair number of narrative comment boxes. Please fill these out. Again, the resource desk is looking to see that everything's completed. And one of the parts of everything being completed is that there is text in these boxes. Unfortunately, we haven't programmed the resource desk to read and comment on this for you, but at the same time, we know when data has been put in here. And so until you comment, when you've been asked to comment, if you haven't commented, you're not going to be able to submit the checklist. So please make sure you're going through and putting comments in. What comments should you put in? Yeah, something that you think clarifies the response that you're making. So I would recommend not putting something like submitted as a comment in the comment box. I'd like to see a little bit more explanation. This isn't applicable because, those sorts of things. We don't need to get into a long narrative. We're not looking for 15-page term paper about this, but at the same time, give a little snapshot of what's going on. Okay. Like I have another question. Are you stating the elderly can't keep that designation after a RAD closing? What happens to elderly units after a RAD closing? How can they remain elderly? So that's a great question, and I'm glad that you asked it. So all I'm saying is that elderly properties in public housing are designated as elderly. When they convert to RAD, that designation turns into a preference. It's an elderly preference. Preferences mean that in case that there's an available unit and there's nobody on the waiting list, it is possible for a family to move in there. You can preference elderly. You can make it very difficult for families to come in, but you cannot designate the property, i.e. say that there is no way that a family could live in the elderly property. That is not allowed in Section 8. So what happens after closing is that designation goes away and the property continues to be elderly. Typically, you see this on efficiencies and small one-bedroom senior buildings where it doesn't really make sense that a family would want to live there, but it just makes families are not going to likely live there because of the way the waiting list is set up and everything else. But it's just a semantics game, and it's also just an opportunity potentially if the property was, if there were no elderly folks available and there were families that wanted to move into a one bedroom, you wouldn't hold them vacant when you had families that needed to move in. I think that's the opportunity there. So the designation just goes away, the preference stays in place. Okay. So, and again, that would not be a change in occupancy type. If I've got an elderly property today and it's going to be elderly coming out of RAD, there's no change in occupancy. FHEO is not going to need to do a review. You're not going to need to submit anything. All that's clarified is that that designation is going to become a preference. Okay. Probably the most complicated new card that we've put together is the unit reduction and change in bedroom configuration or increased accessibility unit. So we are really trying to accomplish a lot of goals with this card. And so you're going to find that there are lots of very specific questions, very detail-oriented questions, in order for you to provide the information FHEO most wants to review, and so that FHEO can do the comprehensive review and give the approval that they need to do. So it's a marriage of kind of two worlds here. It's trying to make sure that you as a PHA are submitting all the required documents one time, not having to be asked multiple times and multiple clarifications, and also that FHEO and their staff are getting the questions that they really want answered and the data that they really need to make the answer that they want to make, get the approval that they need to get. So that's the goal with this. Again, I've already referenced it, but you're going to see more tables. We've got more information and more tables. Lots of information for you all to complete in table format. So hopefully this won't be overwhelming. We've tried to, you'll notice this one, we've tried to color code things where it makes sense so that we're looking like. So you're entering in the mobility ones all the same. We're seeing the changes in mobility versus the vision and hearing. So it's easy for you to input, easy for FHEO to review and approve your transactions. All of that sort of thing is really there for you all to make it easier. And hopefully it will be. We're hoping that this is not going to be onerous. Certainly the first time you do it, it's going to take a little bit of time. But the charts and the templates that you were completing before did the same thing. They took some time. They were a little bit clunky sometimes, but everyone figured it out. And I think in the end, we all got a good product there. Question on the elderly preference versus designation. Where can I find that resource or regulation? So I would look on the RAD resource desk under there are a number of guides there for you all to take a look at for that. And then I believe there's some additional information in an FHEO notice that's also posted on the resource desk. So I would go there first, and if you can't find what you're looking for there, certainly circle back and send the resource desk a question, and we can help you with that. Okay. All right. So once I complete all of these, what will end up happening is they'll all go into the FHEO queue to be reviewed and approved just like they did before. So if you're looking for the status of your reviews and the assignments of your reviews, you can always go here and you can see this was submitted, okay? and hopefully the reviews are getting done. And then to the extent that something gets rejected, you're going to get a notice from the resource desk saying something's been rejected. There'll be a letter or document posted here from FHEO explaining what happened, and you can go get back in touch with them or fill out the information the way that they'd like you to fill it out. But hopefully, in a case where there's something that's being rejected by FHEO, we always encourage the FHEO staff to reach out directly to PHA so that you know what the issues are and you can get clarification from that perspective. So none of this is going to change. This is what you're used to seeing. It's going to continue to be seen the same way. It's just going to be given to FHEO, presented by you, and delivered to FHEO in a different way. And similarly, all of these will fall off of the concept call checklist. So once you get that accessibility review completed and approved, the site neighborhoods completed and approved, and change in occupancy done. So once that all is done, then you'll be able to submit the concept call just like you could before. So if you're ever wondering what's keeping you from submitting a concept call, this list is here. And if there's an FHEO item on this list, then you know you haven't gotten the necessary approval yet, and you need to kind of check and see what's going on with that. Okay. Another question. This is going to be implemented. So the question is, when is this going to be implemented? Are projects that are in process of completing the concept call checklist going to have access to the new system, or will they continue to use the old form? That's a great question. So this is going to be implemented after this call. So tomorrow morning, when you log onto the resource desk, all of these cards will be active. Anybody who is already submitted and FHEO is already reviewing your SNS submission or your change in occupancy review, all of those in the old format, those will be completed using the old format. FHEO has already started those reviews. They'll get back in touch with you. If you need to submit a new checklist, we're just going to ask you to submit it to the resource desk so that we can then upload it there for you on your behalf. FHEO will see it the same way, and they'll finish it up that way. But anything new, so if it hasn't been submitted today, anything new starting tomorrow, that's going to be submitted using the new system. So the new ones will come in. FHEO is doing a training with their staff at the end of the week to kind of walk through how they're going to be doing their reviews and approvals. So this is all going to happen pretty quick. But I think it's going to be very helpful for everybody. We're excited to have this. Again, we've been working with FHEO for a long time on this, and particularly hard for this calendar year to get to this point. So we've done a lot of testing. There'll be some bumps and bruises here along the way, but like everything that we do on the resource desk, but hopefully there won't be too many. So that's all I had from my demo. There have been a couple of questions already, but I'll open it up for other questions, other comments. If anybody wants to raise their hand and participate, I'm happy for them to do that. Or if they just want to type in questions like we've already been getting, I'm happy for those. Questions, comments, thoughts? Well, that's fine. I figured it would take about half an hour to do this presentation, so I was pretty accurate. I wanted to give some time for questions if anybody had them. Again, this training will be posted to the resource desk in the next couple of days, so that if you want to watch it again, hear me talk again, great. Or if you've got colleagues and certainly other PHAs who weren't able to participate today and new PHAs to the program in the future will be able to watch this presentation. So, like an auctioneer, I'll give you a couple of more moments if you have any questions. Otherwise, we will sign off. All right, I got another question. Here we go. So the first question is, what determines if you need a site neighborhood standard? Well, if you're doing new construction, you have to do a site neighborhood selection. It's that simple. Anything that's not doing new construction, you don't have to do a site neighborhood selection. Okay. So one of the other comments made from a colleague of ours in the recap, just to reiterate, and I'll show this again, if you don't answer the questions correctly on the resource desk in the concept call checklist, then you're not going to get the cards that you need to complete. So for example, if I update the checklist and I say if I'm not doing new construction anymore, look what goes away. The site neighborhoods is now gone. Okay. Look what's fallen off my list of required items, the site neighborhoods review. Okay. So if your transaction is new construction and you don't say it's new construction, the system doesn't know it, And when you request the concept call and you inform the transaction manager and the branch chief that are on that call, oh yeah, we're doing new construction, they're going to say, well, you should have answered the question correctly, because now we're not going to invite you to submit, first of all, and second of all, you've got to go all the way back and start your FHEO review process over again. And again, that's going to be up to 60 days. So that's something you don't want to do. So make sure you are looking at the questions, making sure that you're answering them correctly, and getting this taken care of. Another question. Will the HUD TM approve the relocation accessibility checklist before or after the concept call? So the TM relocation checklist that they do is done after the financing plan has been submitted. So that's never a holdup. You'll never see that approval required on this here. The only FHEO, sorry, the only relocation review that's not submitted or required to be done is FHEO. And that's only required if you're doing more than 12 months relocation. The TM relocation checklist is done at the financing plan stage. Okay. Question about timing. What do you do if FHEO keeps asking you for more information and your approval is dragging out beyond 60 days? So if that's happening to you and you're having a hard time working through things with FHEO, please send a note to the resource desk. Recap has got a couple of designated folks that work with FHEO on a regular basis, and they will intervene on your behalf and kind of get in the mix and see what's going on. But that's a great question, and something that we do see every once in a while. So if you're having trouble with FHEO, and you don't have to wait beyond the 60 days, if you've submitted and you've gone back and forth with FHEO and you're just not seeing eye to eye, please let the resource desk know, and we will get somebody from Recap in the mix and solve that for you. The presentation recording, that's going to be on the resource desk. So we'll get that posted in the next couple of days, and you'll be able to see that under the webinar section. When you log into the resource desk, all the webinars are posted there. Okay. Is the scale of information requested in this form the same as it was previously requested in the supervisory? Yes, the scale is virtually the same. I think there are a couple of more tables that we're also working with. We'll be working with you all as you submit this to try and make sure that you only have to enter that information one time. So there may be duplicative entries where we don't like them to be, but they were always duplicative because change in occupancy type, there was a table, and unit configuration change, there was a table, and there were two different forms that had to be submitted. So those always had to be submitted separately. So we're going to try and figure out how to make it a little bit easier for you when you do that. But one of the things that we shied away from was having PHAs just have to answer these questions always, regardless of whether or not they were being required to do an upfront civil rights review, which is why it's so important for you to answer the questions correctly so that you're not entering information that you don't have to enter into. Okay. You've already submitted the FHEO unit reduction document and accessibility checklist, but FHEO isn't completed. Well, no, you will not provide updates. So if you have submitted the FHEO documentation already in the financing plan grid, if that checklist is already there, you will not have to submit it ever again unless FHEO asks you for it. And when they do, you'll have to do it in the checklist. You won't do it in the new format. Okay, so you will work through. If you've already submitted the checklists today, you're always going to do the checklists. Okay. How does an elderly preference work with the low-income housing tax credit project? Same way. So again, you can have an elderly. I can't stress this enough. Elderly properties are allowed. There's just the terminology that's different. So a tax credit senior property is elderly preferenced, as long as it's not designated. Preferences are what Section 8 allows. So a tax credit senior project will have an elderly preference. Okay, this is not anything that it shouldn't even be new. This is the way it's always supposed to have been. And it just needs to, we're just clarifying it because there have been instances where folks have not understood this and we've had to unwind it or change it later. So the elderly preference is still making it elderly property, and tax credit properties that are senior will still be tax credit properties. Okay. So there's a question about the relocation review. The relocation review, an FHEO relocation review is only required if relocation is expected to last more than 12 months. That is correct. The relocation review card is always required to be completed. FHEO doesn't do a secondary review unless it's more than 12 months. So if your relocation plan is that you're going to relocate tenants for 6 months, and that's it, FHEO is not going to do a review of that. The RAD transaction manager is going to do a review of that, but FHEO is not. So there's not a secondary upfront civil rights review from FHEO. It's part of the transaction manager's review. That's the distinction there. So new construction, there's a question about whether new construction, if there's a leeway on new construction for existing public housing owned properties where the units are being demolished. So if the property is being, if I have a high-rise property and I'm going to rebuild a new high-rise property using the same footing and same foundation and same footprint, that is not new construction. That doesn't happen very often, but that is a quote unquote loophole in the site neighborhood standard, because if I'm building back on the same footprint, using the exact same footprint, then that's not considered new construction. That's considered substantial rehab, for lack of a better term, okay? But that's very rare that happens. So there's a question about minority concentration. Is if it's determined that site neighborhoods is needed and new construction replacement housing, but we are in minority concentration, what are the exceptions for their approval? So that's what's in the cards. So when you say you're doing new construction, you're going to go through and explain what the situation is. So if you're in an area of minority concentration, you're going to explain to FHEO why that's acceptable, and then they're going to go back and forth with you to approve whether or not that exception works. That's what the review is all about for FHEO in the area of minority concentration. That's why it's important to answer the questions correctly. That's why it's important to download the tools that they're providing, to read the guidance that they've given. Again, they've worked very closely with us to make sure that they've provided the guidance that they think is necessary for you all to complete these checklists correctly, so that they can get the reviews and they can get back to you with any questions that they have, okay? For RAD Section 18 blends, these reviews would comprise the civil rights review as part of the additional documents required as part of the financing plan submissions for Section 18. So I'll have to double check. There are some different civil rights reviews for Section 18, but a lot of this is the same. That's correct. But there are a couple of additional pieces that I think the SAC wants to see, and I'll double check that. Shoot us a note, Margaret, on the resource desk, and I can get back to you on this one, because there are a couple of things. It's in the notice. I'm not remembering off the top of my head that there are one or two things. Most of them, you are correct. Most of it's covered here, and the SAC is going to go with the FHEO approvals that they've gotten for these already. But there is something unique. I'm just not remembering off the top of my head. Okay. Another question that came up, or clarification that was requested, was on the concept call checklist about the de minimis. So in RAD, you can reduce the number of units at the site through a de minimis reduction. So if, for example, you have 100 units at the site and you want to reduce the property to 95, you can actually do that through the de minimis reduction, because it's 5 units. And so you can just say, yep, it's de minimis. So when you answer this question, it's important for you to say that I'm using the de minimis amount, so it's not in excess. So if I had a 100 unit site and I was trying to reduce the number of units to 90, so reduce it by 10, that would be in excess of the de minimis amount. And that's going to require further approval, okay? The de minimis reductions don't require further approval, okay? The non-de minimis, the excess piece, that's what requires approval, okay? Great questions, great conversation. I always love that as I'm trying to wrap up, that's when the questions come. So I'll try that trick again. So unless there are other questions, here we go. For transfer assistance from one site to a different site for new construction, is a site neighbor standards review required? It absolutely is. New construction requires site neighborhood standards, period. That's what site neighborhoods is. That's exactly what it's for. So if I'm doing new construction, I've got to get site neighborhoods. Transfer assistance, it's also different approvals, but new construction is always going to require site neighborhoods. All right. Well, it looks like I have tapped everyone out. All right. All right, so this is going to go live tomorrow. You'll no longer be uploading anything into the financing plan grids. You'll start completing these cards. So tomorrow morning, you'll no longer have the ability to hit an upload button in the financing plan grid. You'll use these cards instead. If you've already uploaded something and FHEO has started their review, you're going to finish out using the what I'm calling now the classics, the classic cards. You're not going to move to the new ones. But everyone else, all the new stuff, we're moving over tomorrow morning. So thank you all very much. And if you have other questions or something comes up, please, please, please use the resource desk. Shoot us a note. We're always happy to help out. If you're having any difficulty at all, shoot us a note. We're always happy to get on the phone. Someone from our team will help you through it. So we don't want anybody to struggle. We're happy to make it easy for whoever we can. Thank you all very much and have a good rest of your day.